Imagine doing the right thing, only to have it become the very weapon used to destroy your world. Harry Thompson was a man who lived by a strict code of integrity, balancing the cutthroat world of high-stakes finance with the tender reality of being a solo parent. He had spent years building a reputation that was bulletproof, knowing that in his position, a single shadow of a doubt could end a career. But one rainy Friday night, a simple act of decency toward his intoxicated boss spiraled into a nightmare that threatened to take away his job, his freedom, and the one person he lived for. He thought he was being a hero, but by sunrise, he realized he had walked straight into a trap. Harry Thompson stood in front of his hallway mirror, adjusting his tie with the kind of precision usually reserved for heart surgeons. At 35, Harry was the definition of put together. He was a senior analyst at Harrison Financial, a firm where the carpets were thick, the windows were floor to ceiling, and the expectations were sky high. As a black man in a corporate environment that often felt like a minefield, Harry knew he didn't have the luxury of being average. He had to be twice as good, twice as fast, and 10 times more reliable than anyone else in the room. He didn't mind the hard work. He did it for the 6-year-old girl currently sitting on the sofa, humming a song from her upcoming school play. Ella was Harry's entire universe. Since his wife had passed away 4 years ago, Harry had become an expert at pigtails, bedtime stories, and packed lunches, all while managing multi-million-pound portfolios. Tonight was the annual company mixer, an event he usually avoided, but his mentor had pulled him aside earlier that week. "Show your face, Harry," he'd said. Visibility is currency in this building. Harry had calculated it perfectly. He would spend exactly 1 hour at the gala, shake the necessary hands, and be back in time to tuck Ella in and hear her final rehearsal for the school play the next morning. The gala was held at a luxury hotel in the heart of the city. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and even more expensive ambition. Harry moved through the room with a practiced ease, offering firm handshakes and insightful comments about the quarterly markets. He was looking for his exit when he spotted Cara Carter. Cara was the vice president of the firm, and Harry's direct supervisor. She was brilliant, sharp-tongued, and notoriously cold. Usually, she was the personification of professional composure. But tonight, something was wrong. Cara was leaning heavily against a marble pillar, a half-empty glass of scotch dangling dangerously from her fingers. Her hair, usually pinned in a tight, flawless bun, was beginning to fray. Harry watched from a distance, hoping someone else would notice. But the other executives were too deep in their own conversations, or perhaps too intimidated to intervene. When Cara tried to walk toward the bar and stumbled, nearly crashing into a waiter, Harry knew he couldn't just walk away. His conscience wouldn't let him. He approached her cautiously, keeping a respectful distance. "Ms. Carter, Cara, it's Harry Thompson. Are you feeling all right?" She looked at him, her eyes glassy and unfocused. She tried to offer a sharp retort, something about her being perfectly fine, but the words came out as a slurred mumble. She swayed again, and this time, Harry had to reach out to steady her. As he did, he felt the eyes of a few younger associates on him. He felt a sudden cold prickle of unease. He knew how this looked. He knew the politics. But Cara was barely standing, and the hotel staff were already starting to whisper. If she stayed here, she would humiliate herself and potentially ruin her career in a single night. "I think it's time to head home," Harry said softly. He looked at his watch. His hour was up. He should be leaving for Ella. But he couldn't leave a vulnerable woman in this state, boss or not. He managed to find her coat and her handbag, guiding her toward the valet stand. He intended to put her in an Uber, but as they reached the curb, Cara began to panic, crying out that she had lost her phone and didn't know her address. She was becoming hysterical, attracting even more attention. Harry realized that sending her off alone in a taxi in this condition was a recipe for disaster. With a heavy sigh and a glance at his phone, a text from the babysitter saying Ella was asking for him, Harry made a choice. He would drive her home himself, drop her at her door, and then race back to his daughter. He helped her into the passenger seat of his car, his mind already racing with the logistics of the next hour. He didn't see the flash of a smartphone camera from the shadows of the parking garage. He didn't see the small, satisfied smile on the face of a rival. Colleague who had been watching the entire exchange. Harry only thought about getting a person in need to safety. He had no idea that his act of kindness was about to become the catalyst for the greatest crisis of his life. The drive to Cara's penthouse was tense and quiet, punctuated only by her occasional incoherent mumbling. Harry kept his eyes fixed on the road, his hands gripping the steering wheel at 10 and 2. He was acutely aware of the optics. If a police officer pulled them over, how would it look? A black man, driving his highly intoxicated, white female boss through the city at 11 o'clock at night. The thought made his stomach churn, but he pushed it down. He was a good man doing a good thing. Surely the world would see that. When they finally arrived at her luxury apartment building, the doorman was nowhere to be seen. Harry had to help Cara out of the car. She could barely put one foot in front of the other. He practically had to carry her through the lobby and into the elevator. As the gold-plated doors closed, Cara leaned her head against his shoulder, her weight heavy and limp. Harry felt a bead of sweat roll down his neck. He reached into her bag, found her key card, and navigated the hallway to her door. Inside the apartment was a cold, minimalist temple of glass and steel. It didn't look like a home. It looked like a showroom. Harry guided her to the nearest sofa, easing her down onto the cushions. "Cara, you're home. I'm going to leave some water here for you. Please stay put." He went to the kitchen, filled a glass, and placed it on the coffee table. He didn't linger. He didn't even take off his coat. He was in and out in less than 5 minutes, locking the door behind him as he left. He made it home just as the babysitter was packing her things. He paid her extra, checked on the sleeping Ella, and collapsed into his own bed, exhausted but relieved. He had done his duty. He had protected his boss and maintained his integrity, or so he thought. The next morning, the sun was bright and Harry felt a sense of peace. He made pancakes for Ella, laughing as she practiced her lines for the play. "I'm the brave knight, Daddy. I have to save the kingdom," she shouted, waving a plastic sword. "And you'll be the best knight there ever was," Harry replied, kissing her forehead. His phone vibrated on the counter. It was an email from HR. The subject line read, "Urgent meeting, immediate suspension." Harry's heart dropped into his shoes. He opened the email, his breath hitching. It stated that a serious allegation of misconduct had been filed against him by a senior executive. He was instructed not to contact anyone at the firm and to report to the HR office on Monday morning. Within minutes, his corporate login was disabled. His work phone went dead. He sat at the kitchen table, the sounds of Ella's playing fading into a dull roar in his ears. What could this be? He hadn't done anything wrong. Then a text arrived from a friend at the office. It contained a link to an internal gossip thread. There was a photo, the one taken in the parking garage. It showed Harry leaning close to a disheveled Cara, appearing to pull her toward his car. The caption suggested that Harry had taken advantage of her intoxicated state to force her into a private encounter. The room began to spin. Harry looked at Ella, who was now dressed in her night costume, waiting for him to take her to the school. He felt a wave of nausea. He knew how these stories went. In the corporate world, the narrative was often written by the person with the most power. If Cara Carter decided to protect her reputation by blaming him for the night's events, Harry wouldn't just lose his job. He could lose everything. The no margin for error rule he had lived by his whole life had just been shattered. He had played by the rules, but the game was rigged. As he drove Ella to school, he forced a smile, but his mind was a battlefield. He realized that Cara hadn't just remained silent. She had actively filed a report claiming he had harassed her at the party and followed her home. Against her will, she was painting him as a predator to cover up her own professional lapse. The betrayal stung more than the fear. He had saved her from public disgrace, and in return, she was using his race and his position to bury him. He watched Ella run onto the school stage, her face glowing with joy, and he realized with a terrifying clarity that if he couldn't prove his innocence, he might not be there to see her grow up. Monday morning arrived like a funeral procession. Harry dressed in his best suit, but it felt like a suit of armor that had been pierced. He walked into the Harrison Financial building, noticing the way the security guards, men he had greeted by name for years, now looked away or watched him with suspicion. He was escorted to a small windowless conference room. Inside sat the head of HR, a stern woman named Sarah, and the firm's legal counsel, To his surprise, Cara Carter was not there. "Harry," Sarah began, her voice devoid of its usual warmth. "We've received a formal complaint from Ms. Carter regarding the events of Friday night. She alleges that you made unwanted advances during the gala and that you followed her to her residence, entering her home without permission. We also have photographic evidence of you appearing to coerce her into your vehicle." Harry felt a surge of righteous anger, but he kept his voice steady. "That is a complete fabrication. Ms. Carter was dangerously intoxicated. I saw her stumbling, nearly falling. I intervened to ensure she got home safely. I didn't want her to be a victim of an accident or worse. I drove her home, stayed for 5 minutes to give her water, and left immediately. I have nothing to hide." "Ms. Carter claims she does not remember asking for your help," the lawyer interjected. "She says she woke up the next morning feeling violated and confused as to why you were in her home. In these cases, Harry, the firm has a zero-tolerance policy. Given the power dynamic and the optics, we are looking at immediate termination and a potential criminal referral." Harry leaned forward. "Check the security cameras in her building. Check the GPS on my car. I was there for minutes. I didn't even take my coat off. The building's lobby cameras were undergoing maintenance on Friday night," Sarah said coldly. "And GPS only shows your location, not your actions inside the apartment. It's your word against a vice president's, Harry, and frankly, the photo circulating on social media doesn't help your case." Harry realized then that this wasn't just about a misunderstanding. This was a calculated move. Cara was a rising star who had been tipped for a promotion to the board. An alcohol-fueled public breakdown would have ended those dreams. By accusing Harry, she turned her weakness into a story of survival, making herself the victim and him the villain. It was the oldest trick in the book, and it was working perfectly. The meeting ended with Harry being told to surrender his badge. He walked out of the building, the air outside feeling cold and thin. He felt like a ghost. He went to a nearby park and sat on a bench, watching parents play with their children. For the first time in his life, Harry felt truly powerless. He thought about his bank account, the mortgage, and Ella's private school tuition. He thought about the look on Ella's face if he were to be taken away. But then, a spark of defiance lit up in his chest. Harry hadn't reached his position by giving up. He knew Cara was lying, and he knew that even the most careful liars left tracks. He went home and began to piece together a timeline. He looked at his own phone records, his bank statements, and then he remembered something. During the drive, Cara had been rambling. At one point, she had reached into her bag to show him a video on her phone, something about a cat or a funny clip she'd seen earlier. She had dropped the phone between the seats. Harry remembered hearing it clatter. But in his rush to get her inside and get home to Ella, he had forgotten about it. He ran to his car, heart pounding. He shoved his hand into the dark, narrow space between the passenger seat and the center console. His fingers brushed against something cold and smooth. He pulled it out. It was Cara's phone. It was locked, of course, but as he held it, a notification popped up on the screen. It was a message from another executive at the firm, the one who had taken the photo. It read, "The photo is everywhere. Everyone believes the story. Your promotion is safe. Just keep sticking to the script. Thompson is done." Harry stared at the screen. It was the smoking gun. It wasn't just Cara protecting herself. It was a conspiracy to eliminate him. He realized that if he could get into that phone, he could prove that Cara was conscious, enough to send messages earlier, in the night, and that the entire predator narrative was a constructed lie. But he didn't need to hack the phone. He just needed the right person to see that message. The realization that his life was being dismantled for someone else's career. Advancement was a bitter pill to swallow. Harry spent the night staring at Cara's phone. He knew that simply showing the message to HR might not be enough. They could claim he stole the phone, or that the message was taken out of context. He needed something more. He needed the truth to come from Cara herself. He decided on a risky move. He didn't go to the police and he didn't go back to HR. Instead, he called Cara's private number from his home phone. She answered on the third ring, her voice sharp and defensive. "Harry, how did you get this number? You shouldn't be calling me. My lawyers." "I have your phone, Cara," Harry interrupted, his voice calm but like steel. You dropped it in my car Friday night. I saw the message from Mark. I know about the script. I know you're using me to save your promotion. There was a long, suffocating silence on the other end of the line. Harry could almost hear her calculating, her mind racing to find a way out. I don't know what you're talking about, she finally said. Though her voice wavered. Listen to me carefully, Harry said. I am a father. I have worked every second of my life to be a man of honor. You were falling apart and I helped you. I didn't touch you. I didn't disrespect you. I treated you with more dignity than you're treating yourself right now. If you go through with this, you aren't just firing an employee. You are destroying a family. And for what? A seat at a table with people who would do the same thing to you in a heartbeat? You can't prove anything, she whispered. I don't need to prove it to the world, Cara. I just need to prove it to the board. And I think they'd be very interested to know that their potential new director is conspiring with other staff to frame colleagues. Think about how that looks for the firm's reputation. If I go down, I'm taking the whole story with me. Or you can tell the truth. You can say you were confused, that you made a mistake in your statement, and that I was actually helping you. Harry hung up. He didn't wait for an answer. He spent the rest of the night holding Ella, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. He didn't know if his gamble would work. He was betting on the small piece of humanity he hoped was still left inside a woman who had sold her soul to the corporate ladder. The next day, Harry was called back to the office. This time, the atmosphere was different. The lawyer was gone. Sarah from HR looked pale. Cara Carter was sitting in the corner, her eyes red and her shoulders slumped. Harry, Sarah said, cleared her throat. Ms. Carter has amended her statement. She admits that she was under extreme stress and was heavily medicated on Friday night, which led to a severe lapse in memory and judgment. She has clarified that your actions were entirely helpful and professional. The firm would like to offer its sincerest apologies. Harry looked at Cara. She wouldn't meet his eyes. He realized then that she hadn't done it out of the goodness of her heart. She had done it because she was trapped. He felt no triumph, only a deep, profound sadness. This was the world he worked in, a world where his life was a pawn in a game of optics. The firm offered him a significant raise and a new title to make up for the misunderstanding. They wanted his silence. They wanted the whole thing to go away. Harry looked at the offer on the table. It was more money than he had ever dreamed of. It would secure Ella's future for decades. But as he looked at the logo of Harrison Financial, he realized he couldn't stay. He couldn't work for people who were willing to sacrifice him on the altar of corporate image. He stood up, leaving the offer on the table. I accept your apology, Harry said, but I resign. Effective immediately. He walked out of the room, leaving the executives in a stunned silence. For the first time in years, as he stepped out onto the street, Harry felt like he could breathe. He had lost his job, but he had kept his soul. He had protected his daughter's father from becoming a man he didn't recognize. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of change. Harry didn't just walk away from Harrison Financial. He walked away from that entire way of life. He realized that the no margin for error rule wasn't a law of nature. It was a prison he had built for himself. He used his savings to start his own boutique consultancy firm, working with small businesses and nonprofits organizations that valued people over portfolios. It wasn't easy. There were days when he worried about the future, but every time he saw Ella, he knew he had made the right choice. She didn't care about his title or his salary. She cared that he was there to pick her up from school every day. She cared that he wasn't stressed and angry when they played in the park. One afternoon, Harry was sitting in a small cafe, working on a proposal for a local community center. He saw a news snippet on his laptop. Cara Carter had resigned from Harrison Financial following an internal investigation into culture issues. The truth, it seemed, had a way of coming out eventually, even without his help. He felt a brief moment of pity for her, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of closure. Harry's new life was smaller, but it was infinitely richer. He no longer had to hide who he was or walk on eggshells to prove his worth. He had proven his worth to the only person who mattered, himself. He had faced a storm that should have destroyed him, and he had come out the other side, not just surviving but thriving. The story of Harry Thompson isn't just about a man who took his boss home. It's a story about the power of integrity in a world that often rewards the opposite. It's a reminder that doing the right thing isn't always easy, and it isn't always rewarded immediately, but it is the only way to live without regret. That evening, Harry attended Ella's school play. He sat in the front row, his heart swelling as she walked onto the stage in her night costume. She looked out into the audience, found his face, and gave him a huge, gap-toothed grin. She performed her lines with confidence, her voice ringing out through the auditorium. "I have saved the kingdom," she proclaimed, raising her plastic sword high. Harry cheered louder than anyone else in the room. He realized that he had done the same thing. He had saved his own kingdom, his home, his peace, and his relationship with his daughter. He had learned that while the world might try to define you by your mistakes or the lies told about you, your true character is something no one can take away unless you let them. As they walked back to the car after the play, Ella held his hand tightly. "You did a good job tonight, Daddy," she said. "So did you, Ella," Harry replied, lifting her up and setting her in her seat. "So did you." He drove home, the city lights twinkling around them. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't checking his watch. He was exactly where he needed to be. Harry Thompson, a father, a man of honor, and finally, a man who was truly free. Harry's journey teaches us a profound lesson. Your character is your most valuable currency. In a world that often pressures us to compromise our values for success or survival, the greatest victory is staying true to who you are. Harry lost a high-paying job, but he gained a life of purpose and a bond with his daughter that was no longer clouded by the shadows of a toxic career. Sometimes the universe tests us not to break us, but to show us that we are stronger than the boxes people try to put us in. When you face your own morning after, and the world seems to be turning against you, remember that the truth is a slow-burning fire. It might take time, but it eventually burns away the lies. Keep your head high, keep your heart clean, and never let anyone else write your story for you. Would you like me to create a thumbnail concept or a set of engaging tags for this story?